Welcome to the neonVest podcast. I'm here with Luca Parolari from DCVC Bio. DCVC, as I just mentioned, has over $1 billion in AUM and invests primarily in deep tech founders solving tough problems in the world. Luca is on the DCVC Bio side. Hey, Luca, welcome to the podcast. Great to have you on.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Appreciate it. And look, you've been on the platform for a while, and we've also interacted in the past, but I would love to, especially for some of our listeners, but also just to get an intro to DCVC as a company, and then Bio, and then what you guys are finding exciting in the space today in terms of opportunities.
Yeah, so DCVC stands for Data Collective Venture Capital. Is one of the first groups in Silicon Valley that really focused on the thesis that big data will change a lot of verticals, different industries. This transformed from big data into obviously AI to analyze and manage all the data. And so what DCVC, our sister fund, focuses on is all that is really cool, fun, deep tech stuff from aerospace, quantum computing, cybersecurity, climate, robotics, healthcare. As you mentioned, the DCVC side of their shop just raised $1 billion fund that they will be investing in many of these spaces, including climate tech. As DCVC Bio, we came a little bit later. We started about 5 years ago. We are focused on life sciences, which means therapeutics, about 70%. So drug development, about 70% of what we do. The rest is synthetic biology, industrial biotech, and agricultural biotech. We tend to invest on the early stage, both on our side and on the CVC side, seed to Series A. We lead or co-lead about 90% of our investments. So when we come in, we generally take a board seat. We are involved with the companies, helping them fundraise and hire, strategy, take a board seat, and so we're really all in, hands on, and we keep staying with the companies until they make it, hopefully.
No, it makes sense.
Yeah, and on our side, we invest in every type of therapeutics. We focus on platform, not what we call single assets, which means a company that revolves around one particular drug or a drug that is targeting one particular mode of action. It's more platforms that maybe use high throughput screening or computation or other tools that allow to sort of de-risk the whole investment, so that you can have multiple shots on goal, as opposed to have the very binary biological risk. Is it going to work or not work when it gets into patients? So that's how we're seeing the space. As the CVC Bio, we're operating out of a $550 million fund now, core and opportunity, and this is our second fund, and we're currently raising a third fund.
Got it.
And the $1 billion is the sixth fund for the CVC, the deep tech side.
Very interesting. No, I appreciate that color, and yeah, I never realized that it stands for something. I just thought it was a cool name. I didn't think that it had any affiliation with like DC or Washington DC, but I didn't know that it was an anagram. I guess on some of the areas that you mentioned, I mean, biotech has traditionally been considered sort of this binary sector where you're betting on a couple of things, and then the one big winner will pay off most of the investment, similar to how people think about VC economics. And so it's interesting that you have this platform play. I guess even just stepping back, I mean, in your mind and the fund's sort of thesis, how does technology really intersect here? And we've done a lot of work, I mean, me in particular, on the climate side, and you're starting to see it in different ways, like when you're trying to influence certain nature-based solutions, increase all kinds of things, right? Rate of photosynthesis, or change the makeup of kind of topsoil to increase like carbon sequestration. On the biology side, you're seeing things with CRISPR or whatnot. So I'm curious, just, I mean, even more broadly, how do you think technology really changes the healthcare sector?
In healthcare, it's so yeah, that's a very good question, because our group with a few others started really investing in computation for drug development about almost a decade ago, with some of the first companies like Atomwise and Recursion, and more recently Appcelera. These are all companies that use different approaches of machine learning to speed up certain parts of the drug development process. So the drug development process is very costly, takes a lot of time. There are several steps. And I think the best way to use computation as a tool is to really zone into a specific part of this process and see where the opportunities lay. To give an example, Appcelera was a company that designed the first antibody for COVID, the first antibody that got approved by the FDA. They designed it in a week, which in the past would have taken months. So the antibody was designed in a week, and then the rest of the time, the following few months, were manufacturing and commercialization and FDA approval in collaboration with Eli Lilly. But this gives you a sense of what how powerful computation can be to speed up drug development. Another example is another company in our portfolio that is sort of coming out of stealth now, early stage. They are using machine learning to improve what we call the lead to development candidate optimization process of drugs or small molecules. So your classic chemically synthesized drugs, and the way you improve this part of the process, once you find a specific hit, then you improve it until you find a lead among all the hits that you got, and then your lead needs to be fine-tuned to acquire the best properties to distribute in the body, to be more stable, to cross the blood-brain barrier to get to the brain. And so all of these properties were previously improved in a very empirical way, and also based on the knowledge of medicinal chemists. So they think, oh, probably methyl group is gonna make it better here, right? And so they synthesize thousands of molecules over different iterations. You synthesize all this big library. You try them in practice in vitro with experiments. You learn from this, and then you do another round. And this takes 5 to 10 million, a couple of years, and you synthesize 500 to 1,000 compounds. So by using just this algorithm that they put together, they were able to cut down their selection of drugs to 18, and they tested 18 of these, and the top 3 hits, the top 3 performing molecules they found were better than anything else that has been developed by pharma for decades, and this took a couple of weeks actually.
And then I guess that has the testing, because what we've just discussed has related to getting a drug out there and after synthesizing it multiple times. I'm curious as to whether technology or even, I mean, just some of these other processes have had effects when it comes to, okay, now it's been submitted or it's going through the FDA process. Because I mean, one big hurdle is obviously, okay, now we know what the composition of it should be, but now getting it into people's hands is a whole different story, right? With multiple different aspects to it. And it's one of those spaces, I mean, fortunately or unfortunately, where it's being ingested by humans. And so, I mean, that also has the most regulation associated with it. So, I mean, have you seen anything change on that side of the table, or is it mainly around getting it to market, and then after that, it remains sort of similar?
Well, I think that you are trying to optimize in the case, for example, of small molecules, but it could be an antibody, it could be different modalities. You try to get the best possible drug that has most effect and has the least side effects, right? So it's efficacious and safe. This is what the two aspects that the FDA wants you to prove. So going through the process, as you say, it's absolutely right. You need to put it through animal testing and then human, and then eventually put it in clinical trial to see if it's going to work and if it's going to be safe. So you can't escape that part. We don't have an understanding, a sufficient understanding to be moving all of that part in silico. At some point, it might happen. It might be 20 years, it might be 50 years, it might be 10 years. Nobody knows. Certainly, it's not around the corner. So you absolutely have to go through all this process. But what computation can help you do is optimize part of this process, right? So all of a sudden you save 10 millions, you save 2 years of development. For pharma, 10 millions is not a lot of money, but 2 years of development is a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so you basically increase and optimize the whole flow of the system. We obviously don't believe, sometimes naively, there's the perception that you can just do everything. You put your inputs in the computer, something is going to happen in the black box, and then you get spit out the panacea of all the evil in the world. And that obviously it's not the way it works. Hopefully one day, but we're not there yet.
So can I
to
put in ChatGPT what's the cure to cancer, and will it tell me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. And even for models like that, right, they need to be trained, and like people need to be behind them that are guiding them. And then obviously you can use it where it optimizes the process, but there are other elements associated with it. And I guess just on that, like, what are you guys finding particularly interesting right now within the space? What are you actively looking for opportunities in?
Yeah, so well, actually, it's a perfect segue from what we were talking about earlier. One of the companies that we have in our portfolio is called Unlearn, and so this uses machine learning and a software to improve the clinical trial part of their sort of getting a drug to market. So what happens now is that if you have to run a clinical trial, they're extremely expensive, on the order of $100,000 to $200,000 per patient. And when you start to have 100, 200, 300 patients, it becomes really really burdensome, especially with clinical trials for drugs that take a long time to have an effect. Think about neurodegeneration, right? So these are long trials. You need a lot of people. There's a lot of confounding factors. And what Unlearn has been able to do is create what they call a digital twin. So this allows you to cut down. In every clinical trial, you have a group that takes the drug and a group that doesn't take the drug. So you can make a comparison between the two and see if the effect that you observed is due to is actually due to the drug or
you have a null factors. And then you have a test hypothesis.
Exactly. And so in this way, what they can do is cut down the number of the control patients, because they can create digital twins of the patients that are actually taking the drug and model how they would behave over time. So all of a sudden,
and I guess that's by taking a number of tests on them to just figure out what their various levels are.
All the algorithms are developed for a specific type of disease, right? So the population, there's a lot of data input initially to train the algorithm on the population, and then further information comes from the treated group. And so this allows you to shrink basically your control group from 100 maybe to 70% or 80%, which obviously saves a lot of money, and especially saves a lot of time, because you have to all of a sudden recruit 30% less patients, and that might be months, and that means months earlier that the drug can get to market. So
Interesting.
more lives saved. Other things that, because I know that, so biotech is a very, very niche and specialist space. Wanted to also give you a sense of what the other fund is doing,
Sure.
which is more on the deep tech. So they have interest in various places, as you mentioned. Climate is certainly one of the areas of great interest today. We would not only greenhouse gases, but also everything that goes from water, nuclear, hydrogen as a fuel, ammonia production, or nitrogen production for agriculture, internal south heating and heat pumps. A lot of interest in that space. On the other hand, robotics and materials applied to industrial transformation, such as renewable chemicals, for example, or recycling and sorting recycling and optimizing the whole recycling process. On the greenhouse gases, which is one of the spaces that I think a lot more people are familiar with. One of the companies that we are actually investing is one of the few investment that both DCVC and DCVC Bio have together. So we co-led the seed or Series A, but the first money in. It's a methodology that uses an algae that has been shown to decrease the production of methane in the guts of ruminants. So, as everybody knows about CO2 as a big impact greenhouse gas, the thing is that CO2 is so impactful because it takes a lot of time to be reabsorbed by the ecosystem. Methane takes less time to be reabsorbed. So in all the prediction on the future, if your 30-year mark is your target, CO2 is going to have a lot of impact, because the CO2 that you emit today in 30 years is still going to be there. But the methane is not going to have an impact at 30 years. But all of a sudden, if you look at 10 years, it's hugely impactful. It's as impactful as CO2. And because our goals are all of a sudden becoming more and more close to the present, the methane becomes really an important gas to tackle. And 50% of the emission come from leaky pipes of methane that is taken to houses or extraction. And the other 50% comes from ruminants, from cows. And so with this algae, you can add it to the feed of the cows, and it's been shown to reduce the emission of methane up to 98%. So this company is based in Australia, and they work in New Zealand and Australia, and they're getting close to market. Very exciting company, very important issue, and then
Interesting.
Excited about it.
And I mean, there's a lot of intersections that make a lot of sense for the broader theme of the fund. In fact, in this same deep tech report you guys had issued, basically, I mean, obviously there's interest in nuclear fusion and fission, probably more so now that Oppenheimer did so well. But
haven't seen it yet.
Oh yeah,
I'm not prepared.
Yeah, it's quite scary, the possibilities. But I would say one thing which is quite interesting is one of the claims was basically that you can now test both aspects of nuclear out in just a far greater capacity because of the improvement in computer simulation and modeling. And by computing it to that level, you actually don't need to take the risks on actually testing out many of these nuclear like models that you might test out in real life until you already have a pretty good sense of how it might work in terms of the overall structure. I mean, Helion is obviously one very large project, but there are many others. And I mean, a lot of people are looking to, I mean, alternative energy, right? And hydrogen is one, but it has an issue of infrastructure, it has storage issues and transportation, because you mainly do it through ammonia, like you said. But nuclear is one a lot of people are touting now. It's kind of this area where not many people want to discuss it too much, just simply because of history and what's kind of taken place in the nuclear space. But more and more, it's becoming a topic of consideration. And so using kind of these computational tools to really de-risk whatever you can becomes quite interesting from a climate perspective. I actually had one question on that, because this is something I've kind of seen at least discussed in the past. It's around basically no one thinks about the carbon footprint of your data footprint, and so much data is being used today. And while people think, or it's termed as, okay, it's in the cloud, it's actually very much on land. I mean, these huge data servers are storing it. It's just not in your local server. And that takes up a ton of space. It like degrades land and obviously needs significant cooling or whatnot as well. I'm curious as to whether that's a topic that's come up, because obviously data is an incredibly important element of the investments you guys do. Has it come up, the intersection between sort of increasing data usage and effects on the climate from that perspective?
Yes. So there, you're catching me a little bit off guard, because this is not my field. But
so whatever you feel free commenting on.
No, I know of a company, Modular, that DCVC has been focusing on, that is an AI infrastructure company. And so because of this reason you're talking about, AI models are becoming very expensive to train now. Their system basically allow you to be hardware agnostic. So it's a way to save money for companies and save on user infrastructure and production of hardware, and optimization of basically the hardware that is already being used. But certainly, I can see that as being a massive issue when it comes to the novel large language models and foundation models that certainly highly demanding in terms of energy
Yeah, no, and
expenditure.
I think it's something to just monitor, I guess, as we move forward within this space of AI combining with various verticals, combining with climate too. I wanted to move slightly onto the founder side, and I guess just an easy one to start off with. What do you guys like in founders? What attracts you to an investment? What are some of the key things you look for when you're looking at, okay, this guy might be a good guy or girl, or founder, early stage, late stage, would be a good fit for DCVC Bio? You mentioned these platform plays. What else is it about a company that makes it quite attractive?
So in terms of biotech, wish I can speak more intelligently than other fields, but
no, we can focus. I know this is your area of specialty, so we'd love to.
So the crucial point of biotech is the technology, right? So everybody on the team has a PhD or an MD or both. Very technical. I think 95% of our diligence is on the science. So it varies a lot on a case-to-case basis. In terms of team, it's certainly about execution, and differently from other spaces where maybe you have a complete white space. You're inventing a new area that didn't exist before. So all of a sudden, your college graduate could be the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. In biotech, it's slightly more complex because there's a lot of regulation. There's a clear playbook. There's a lot of overheads and moving pieces that go with the manufacturing. You have to do manufacturing that has the highest standard of quality to be able to put it into patients. Complex logistics. So you need to really create a team of people that has done this before and has seen the challenges. So your typical phenotype of the successful CEO is slightly different, maybe from the widespread perception of what might be your tech CEO. So it's probably somebody in their late 40s or early 50s that has already covered some C-suite position and has extensive experience in startup or investing or biopharma. So definitely the team is very important to be able to execute. But I think the condition sine qua non is really the technology. So that's where we focus the most. In terms of outreach for more generic tips for entrepreneurs, certainly clarity and simplify the deck to crucial key aspects, and maybe prepare different decks for different investors. So if you're going to a technically savvy investor, a specialist, who knows very well the space, maybe it's not necessary to spend 10 slides to talk about why cancer is important, right? And still dive and exactly immediately dive into the technology and what the differentiation is. Obviously, knowing very well the rest of the space, because when some entrepreneurs show up and they're like, "Oh, we're the only one doing this," chances are they're not, and it sort of gives you a sense that they don't really know what else is going on out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, certainly having different decks, if you're going for a family office or a generalist fund or a bank, as opposed to a deep tech fund or a biotech specialist fund, this really goes a long way, because we have a volume of maybe 1,000 companies we see every year. We make 3-4 investments. So it's really important to be as effective in communicating what is your differentiation, and as clearly and as quickly as possible. And in terms of exactly because of this reason, because we see so many companies, being proactive is certainly a good suggestion. Sometimes people don't answer because they have to go through maybe 100 unread emails in the inbound, or maybe just slip through the cracks. So being gently proactive is certainly within the limits of respect, so and common sense. And I think that in this sense is also something that we like to do at the DCVC Bio, is to always communicate back to entrepreneurs our decision. If it's a no, we like to send a pass no and not let it linger forever. I think in this space, a clear no is the second best answer you can get, right? As opposed to being, waiting there for forever, to not knowing where you're standing, not knowing if you could move ahead with others, focus your energy elsewhere. So I think it's fully within the rights of the entrepreneurs to gently ask for a clear answer.
Yeah.
And certainly in this market, it's a little bit different than it might have been a year or 2 years ago. So I think now more than ever, all money is green. If you can get money, no matter from whom, no matter the valuation, just take the money. The stupidest thing that a company can do is run out of money. And so in times like this, you can be creative into maybe merging or optimizing, streamlining the activities, try to get money as you can, and fight to live to fight another day.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point, that last point, because I mean, some of these companies that you look at look a little different from SaaS or fintech, and even consumer, right? Like for many of these other sectors, you can sell a little bit, get some revenue, get some traction, get some pilots in, and you can start to build a business that grows from a small base. But here it's interesting because the companies just look very different, right? There's a very high hurdle to pass. Once you surpass that, then you're off to the races. But getting there, and I think that's what you're referring to, there's this massive capital gap, as well as it's almost a different race that you're running, right? It's not the same as sort of a traditional funding route where you can bootstrap it, you get some revenue in and whatnot as well. And I think just one is more of an observation around the fact that look, biotech founders and founders in this space face something a little different. So from your perspective, I mean, are there any smarter ways to think about the space as a whole in terms of either leveraging networks, leveraging like new forms of capital? For instance, recently we partnered with a non-dilutive financing company, mainly for B2B SaaS companies, but to extend runway and kind of get them to that next endpoint when they do end up raising. And you're seeing the VC infrastructure as a whole shift. I'm just curious as to whether you guys, in addition to obviously looking at it from sort of, I'll make a couple of equity investments per year, whether you recommend certain other infrastructure tools or systems that founders should take advantage of, at least within this space.
I
And no
certainly
worries if not, it's just more curiosity, to be honest.
No, all dilutive capital, non-dilutive capital is great. Sometimes it could be helpful at earlier stage, especially before you spin out a technology from a university or at the very early stages. But really focusing the time on really the product and the platform that you want to develop, and partner up with people that can obviously provide not only money but the know-how and the experience. I've seen it to be absolutely crucial.
Interesting.
Sophisticated VCs, at least in the bio space, can make or break a company. So really the quality of the investors that you bring on board, they're going to be, especially if you haven't done this 3 or 4 times, having the guidance, the help, the access to the network, the help in fundraising and regulatory, it definitely makes a big difference. We generally don't take debt in our companies, and I think the whole biotech space tends to be like that. Don't take that until a point in which you're not part of it anymore. It's either a public company, or in special cases, if you have to make massive investments for, say, manufacturing facility that costs you $70 million, maybe some of that can come from that. But most of our playbook revolves around equity investments. But as you say, obviously, it's a great point. If you're talking about consumer companies, then you start to have a product, and the ability of selling and getting some traction gives you access to raising more capital, and so it's a sort of self-fulfilling cycle, but slightly different from biotech.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, part of what we're trying to build is obviously this infrastructure whereby you can connect with people who are specialists in the space. And in fact, about 30% of the superchargers on neonVest are within sort of this healthcare vertical, and many of them focus on biotech, life sciences as a key part of what they do. And I think one of the essential themes of neonVest itself is that people undervalue how important their network is to success. And I mean, obviously capital is extremely important, but having the right network is extremely important as well, in terms of just
Absolutely.
Overall getting intangibles as well as tangible capital in. And I mean, now, so we've got around 550 people on, but many top tier sort of healthcare investors, Illumina, MedTech VP, Lilly Asia. And I think the interesting part is that many of these founders who are on need help with exactly what you said you look for instance, right? Optimizing just the clarity of thought, right? Many of them, like you said, come from science backgrounds. They're not pitch deck experts, or they don't know how to necessarily sell the company. And while some investors may not care about that, others do. And more than that, it's especially if you're early on in the journey, you can use a lot of that guidance. And curious
Absolutely.
as to just as you've been on the platform, what your thoughts are about kind of the experience getting connected with founders, and also the value prop to founders, and how they can use neonVest to scale themselves effectively.
No, absolutely. You're touching on a very important point. We the same way that your VC can give you access to a network. The work of neonVest is invaluable in that sense. So yeah, as you say, I've been on neonVest for might be a year and a half at this point, and seen several companies, and it's I think, I mean, I don't want to, I don't want to say, but I think that it's been helpful for companies. Oftentimes, even if it's not my space, I can give a feedback on a pitch, the way a pitch is presented, or some very generic reaction that you get as an investor that sees a lot of people pitching, and then when needed, I connected some of the entrepreneurs to other investors that might be more useful if it wasn't directly my involvement. And then it's been also fantastic to meet biotech specialist investors here, and it's a way it's a way to make the best out of a network what you guys put together. I'm really happy to be part of it, and hope to be able to continue evolving the platform.
I appreciate that. And I mean, you've been an awesome help to a lot of people on the network, and can see that from the ratings and feedback you've gotten as well. And I guess you touched on an interesting point when you mentioned this VC interaction, because sort of being in VC for a long time myself, it's an odd circumstance when you're interacting with a founder, because you always want to hedge what you say, because you're also thinking at the back of your mind, if this is not a good fit, I can't give too much positive feedback, because then it's just they'll be like, okay, well, why aren't you investing? And to give too much negative feedback, it's the same thing, where it's like,
Nobody wants to hear
you're
their
not
baby's
involved
ugly.
right now, so what are you kind of doing? And I think part of the premise here is really to provide a platform whereby you can leverage what the VC knows, because let's be very honest, like if you have seen 1,000 decks in the same space, you have a very, very good idea as to what is going to work, what is not going to work, especially if you add one marginal one on top of that. And I mean, I just personally feel that VCs especially aren't leveraged to what they actually know, because the construct of that conversation is so often with a binary outcome in mind. It's the end goal is, will you invest or not invest? And whenever you have that binary outcome, the entire conversation changes. And I think what we've seen with obviously your interactions with many others on the platform is that in a way, this is a space whereby you can give more candid feedback, where it can actually be taken and used. And more than that, VCs feel like they can actually use the knowledge that they have, rather than couching everything in many different ways. And so it's been very interesting to see as it's kind of grown.
Absolutely. No, that's an excellent point. I agree 100%. It's when it comes to sort of mentorship, maybe it's a loaded word, but sort of guidance of some sort, or help. It's a safer space than if you're directly pitching a VC. I try to be, when I see companies, I try to be as candid as possible, but within the limits, within the reason of right, not being a negative force, or just always trying to be constructive in the feedback if possible.
Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. More often than not, being direct as an investor, you don't get anything, and you have everything to lose. So that's one reason why I think it could also be frustrating for entrepreneurs to feel like they're not really getting the real answer as to why somebody has passed, and it's necessary for them to try to pivot and improve their proposition. So yeah, absolutely. Spaces like
Totally.
this
And now I
are
feel like it's a running joke almost in terms of which excuse is a VC going to give me? Too early, too little traction, or or whatnot as well. I guess last question, and I do want to open it up, see if any attendees have any questions. This one's more philosophical in nature. So look, I mean, given the rise of AI embedded technology in literally almost everything we do, I mean, do you see any impending problems that we as a society are overlooking? Or in another way, how do you feel about the role technology will play in our lives in the future?
I don't know. It's a fairly, I mean, I don't know if I'm the most qualified person to talk about this, but I feel like personally, it's kind of, it's a scary time. There's been the evolution of technology and society has been faster and faster and this creates bigger and bigger cultural space and shift between generations, because it keeps evolving this fast, that certainly we are in a time in history of great shifts. On one hand, socio-political with the rise of China and maybe, you know, and in the East and the rise of more totalitarian alternatives to democracy. And this comes at the same time as this boom in AI that as of now, it's not particularly, I mean, it's scary because we've seen what happened with Brexit and the elections in the US. But yeah, it can get much scarier if it's not regulated. So I really think that they're the same way that weapons of mass destruction are regulated by governments. Also, the use of AI should be supervised. How do you reconcile the speed of trying not to slow down too much the speed of development with the slowness of government bodies? It's an important question to answer because you can't just, you know, put the genie back in the bottle. You have to speed up the system so that it can match up with the speed of evolution of technology. But I certainly think that even more than climate, that's one of the most, the biggest existential threats for us as a species over the next century.
No, very interesting, and thanks for that. And honestly, I personally feel as though no one needs to be qualified as such to talk about. I mean, obviously people know a lot about it, but what's more interesting is to listen to just people's opinions on it, because regardless of whether you're qualified or not, everyone has a thought on it. And I mean, my view is similar. It's interesting because I think on one hand, especially in this sector, a lot of people tout the value and promise of it. But personally, many people also don't tout it and actively find it to be, and perhaps it's because of being in this sector that one realizes the potential profound impact it can have, and also how it is rewiring sort of your own neural networks, right? And society's fabric as a whole, but especially at the individual level. And I mean, there's just so many different examples of it, right? Like Snapchat's AI, or just so many issues or ways in which it's interacting with humans at a greater scale and what the outcomes of those interactions have been. So it's definitely a wait and watch. It's tough to really slow advancements as such. And so you're right. I think just roadblockers need to be put in place and guardrails such that we at least know the track where we're going, even if the end destination isn't necessarily known.
Yeah, no, it's a good way to put it. Absolutely.
Great. So I mean, honestly, last few minutes, if there's any questions in the audience, feel free to raise your hand. And the only request is that it's not a pitch of the company, but rather just a question for Luca. or myself. And you can feel free to email me after. And while we're waiting for that, I do have some rapid fire for you, Luca.
Oh wow. Okay.
Uh,
Oof.
which I'll start now. So I mean, rapid fire, as the name suggests, just instant or very quick responses. So if not VC, what job would you have?
Architect.
If you had kids, what career would you encourage them to get into?
Medicine.
If you could retire in one place, what would it be?
Oh, that's a tough one. Probably Aeolian Island, Salina, southern
Wow,
Italy.
interesting. Who's a public figure or role model you look up to?
Oh my God. I honestly,
No
let me
worries.
think.
We can pass that one.
Okay, let's pass. Let's pass.
What's the slide you love the most or find the most valuable in a pitch deck?
I think the slide that really goes into explaining the slide in which you understand the technology and you're like, oh, okay, now I get why it's different.
Interesting. Favorite app?
Chess, chess.com.
Nice.
I'm
Nice.
addicted.
Favorite book?
Favorite book, The Invisible Cities by Italo Calvino.
Interesting. Last two. Someone's just asked for rapid fire. What's the most important point for great success?
Resilience.
What geographic region do you see most startup innovation coming from in the next decade?
Within the US or?
Globally.
Certainly the US. There's nothing that can compete in the next decade for sure.
Interesting. Last one. What's your moonshot idea?
Oof. My moonshot idea. You see, that's the problem when you're just when your job is just judging others and having to produce. No, I have some art projects on the side. So I'm working on an installation actually. I don't know if that's a moonshot idea, but it's definitely some part of the creative process.
Yeah, definitely. And no, that's the end of it. But I guess that is extremely interesting, and honestly strongly encourage everyone within this space to have something outside of it that they latch onto. Mine's music and playing guitar, but
Nice.
I think everyone needs some regulation of some kind to bring them back. On that note, I mean, Luca, it was a pleasure having you on. I love the conversation, super interesting, got into a little bit of philosophy too, but love to have you. Thanks for being on.
No, I love the conversation. Thank you so much for having me, and look forward to the next one.
Likewise. Thanks everyone for listening. Appreciate it, and have a great one. See you.